Hi everyone, I'm Laura Garcia and I oversee employer relations in the Emory Career Center. So today I'm going to give you 10 tips in 10 minutes on how you can ace the case interview. A couple things we'll cover today. Number one, some top resources that are out there and some information on where you can practice real cases. We'll talk about the purpose and structure of case interviews, some common case scenarios and frameworks. We'll also go through how you'll be evaluated in the case and some common mistakes that students make. So a couple of resources you absolutely need to go through in order to be prepared. Number one, Case in Point. Excellent read. It's the go-to read for anybody interested in consulting. Just be aware that some of the content may be a little bit above more at an MBA level, but overall definitely something you need to look through. Also through Handshake, if you click on the Career Center tab and resources, you'll get access to something called the Vault. The Vault has 2 great case interview guides where you can also practice case interviews. Also, don't overlook Google. So identify a list of your top consulting firms. Most of them have practice case interviews on their website. And also there's a really cool resource named Inside Sherpa where you can practice more in-depth cases with BCG and Accenture, for example. One thing that I wanted to point out as well, so for example, with McKinsey, I think many times students think you have to be a business major in order to go into consulting, but over 1/3 of their consultants actually come from majors outside of the School of Business. So just something I wanted to point out, consulting isn't just for business majors. Tip 2, understand the purpose and structure of case interviews. A case interview is designed to replicate what it's really like to be a consultant and to see if you can handle it. So what will happen is you'll be posed with a problem, a case. You're expected to write down the key facts. You then summarize what you heard and identify the objective of the case. You will ask clarifying questions to get more information. You'll then pause, take time to figure out your approach and organize your answer. You'll present your solution and engage in the conversation back and forth. And you'll ultimately synthesize the key points. A couple common case scenarios. Number one is probably the most common, where you meet with an interviewer one-on-one and you're presented with a case. Sometimes there's more than one interviewer. You may also be given a group case where you're given a scenario on site where you work with a competitor to present a solution. Usually that's a 2nd round or 3rd round interview. Another way that some employers will give you a case is giving you a case ahead of time and asking for you to present your recommendations on site. But those are the most common ones you'll experience. A couple of case interview questions that you may experience. So brain teasers, things like, how many golf balls would fit into a pool. So you can kind of read through, pause this video and read through if you'd like. It really depends on the organization, the type of case that they'll ask you. I would strongly encourage you to use things like glassdoor.com. You can actually look through interview questions that were posed in the past. A couple things that you should know numbers-wise going into a case interview. So the population of the US, so about 300 million, the average household size of about 3 people, the average number of US households, so roughly 100 million, average life expectancy, age distribution, so on and so forth. The key thing is you need to understand how to calculate percentages and to perform quick math. Consultants I've spoken with in the past have encouraged students to download some mental math apps on their phone just to get in the habit of quickly having to come up with things without using your calculator. You do need to understand how to take notes and make sure you're really good at listening and picking up on the breadcrumbs. So everything that they're sharing with you is important. So make sure you're taking some great notes as they're presenting the case to you. And lastly, make sure that you pull from multiple frameworks in order to, approach your particular answer. Don't feel like you have to pick one set model, and we'll go over those coming up. So case notes, a couple things you should take note of. So the information given to you by the interviewer, jot down some models or approaches on how you'll approach the case, and make sure you understand the objective of the case. Otherwise, what you present will not make sense. In terms of the key content, this may be a 2nd page, write the objective again at the top, think through the answer to the case, lay out that structure, and consider adding graphs or charts as appropriate. In terms of taking notes and the language you should use throughout this case interview, I received these tips from an Emory alum who is a former consultant with PwC, A.T. Kearney, and is now at Deloitte. So the way that she approached it is to have 3 pages landscape. So page 1, they would include some of the context, that situation, write down the objective, and a data gathering framework or 2 to make sure that she stayed focused during that case. Page 2, she focused on kind of the thinking and the math, and page 3 was synthesizing what she collected, so that way she could have recommendations at the very end. So it's important to have a viewpoint, but make sure that you're supporting it with facts and be clear on your assumptions. At some point during the case, the interviewer will essentially stop giving you information. So you have to walk through what you're thinking, state your assumptions, using some of those key facts, for example, that I mentioned earlier, so that way you can make your recommendations. Make sure that you're being clear on your rationale. So based on the information of blank, this is what I would recommend. Note any assumptions or potential areas of uncertainty. So assuming that if this is the case, here's what I would recommend. Do note some potential methods for clarifying pieces of information that you don't know, and make sure that you round your numbers and talk through your conclusions. So here are just a couple case interview frameworks. I'm not going to go through the specifics of them. The purpose of a case framework is to remind you of all the pieces of information you need to collect from that particular case so you can make a recommendation back to the interviewer. Depending on the industry or area, some may be more important than others. So if you're working on a case that deals with sales or marketing, probably the 5 Ps may be something that you pull from. Tip 8, be aware of the silent treatment. Sometimes in the case interview, the interviewer may be silent. That doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It's perfectly normal to have silent pauses during the interview. I actually encourage that. So once they get the case, you summarize it back, you've identified the objective, you've asked for clarifying questions. It will be silent for at least a minute or 2 while you're working through your frameworks and you're working through your recommendations. So don't be afraid of it being silent or for it being silent. Understand that you will be challenged. So they're going to ask you, why did you decide that? Do you think that's reasonable? And don't think that it necessarily means that what you're proposing is wrong. More so, they're just trying to see how you handle being challenged, because as a consultant, your recommendations may be challenged by the high-level execs that likely brought you on for that particular assignment. Make sure you defend your thoughts, but don't become defensive in what you recommend. You can change your answer as new information is presented. That's often a tactic in the case interview, that they'll give you additional information to see how can you adjust. And make sure that you write legibly. Some consulting firms will ask for your written notes if you go in person for the case interview. Understand how you're being evaluated. So communication, do you have a strong tone? Delivery, is it grammatically correct? Because depending on your communication skills, that may determine how effective of a consultant you would be. Were you logical? Were you creative in your solution? This is a big one, coachability. Did you listen to what they said? If they gave you new information, did you adjust your recommendations based on that? Did you listen well and identify the correct objective? Did you come across as persuasive or confident in your recommendations? And do you have a strong presence? Are you likable? It's not just coming up with the right answer. You have to be persuasive and likable, so the firm that you're working with, the organization where you're providing your consulting services, actually implements what you suggest. Last tip, know the common mistakes. So common mistakes that I hear from consultants, students may miss a key fact. They get too fixated on one model that may not fit the case, or felt so locked into that framework they didn't pull from a couple of others that made more sense. This is a big one, immediately jumping into suggestions instead of asking questions and kind of thinking through your recommendations. Don't be afraid of that silent time. Not giving enough time to reflect and coming up with a solution, that's kind of in line with the point before. Not proposing alternatives and talking through your thought process. Mental math is off, or what you present isn't logical. A couple final tips: practice, 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 preferably with a partner. They may approach things differently than you would, and you may learn something from the conversation. I encourage you to create a case journal where you start writing through how you would respond to different scenarios. That will help hone your skills, and you'll feel more prepared going into the interview. And lastly, if you're not a part of a consulting focused student group, I would encourage you to join one, so that way you can get more practice and learn more about the field. So again, Laura Garcia with the Emory Career Center. I hope you have a wonderful week.